Welcome to the best online course for learning all you need to build beautiful websites using HTML and CSS. I am assuming you are an absolute beginner who knows nothing about HTML and CSS, and I will take you from here to building absolutely beautiful websites which can run and look good on multiple devices. This course should be divided into 3 parts. In the first part, we will explore the basic concepts of HTML. In the second part, we will explore the basic concepts and advanced concepts of CSS, and in the final part, we will work on a practice project which is going to help us implement all of what we learned in the first 2 parts. For this course, you will need a PC with an internet connection, a code editor like VS Code, Sublime Text Editor, or Atom. I will recommend you using VS Code in order to keep track with the course. Lastly, you will need a web browser. We will be using Google Chrome for this course. What will you learn in this course? You will learn the basics of HTML and CSS, learn how to use web development tools. You will also learn how to build and style websites effectively, and finally, how to make these websites responsive for several devices. This course is going to provide several exercises, quizzes, and assignments. So pick a plan that is suitable for you right now and get unlimited access to all the present and future courses that will be available on this platform. See you in the next one. Before we start, we must first understand what this whole web development thing is all about. Every website that you visit on the internet is built by a web developer. To build this website, web developers make use of the following tools: HTML, which stands for Hypertext Markup Language, CSS, which stands for Cascading Style Sheet, and JavaScript. HTML is a standard markup language for creating web pages. It describes the whole structure of a web page and it tells the browser how to display content. CSS is a styling language. It defines how HTML elements should look. It is thanks to CSS that you can transform simple websites to beautiful looking websites. And finally, we have JavaScript. JavaScript is a programming language which is run by a web browser and allows you to make web pages interactive. Let's put it into a clearer perspective. Think of all of this like the human body. HTML is the human skeleton. CSS is like our skin and all the additional details that engulf the skeleton and makes us look beautiful and distinguishable. JavaScript is the brain. It tells the website how to behave, what and what not to do, and much more. Nearly every website has 2 main parts, the front end and the back end. The front end, which is what the end user sees directly on their web browser, and the back end is what the user does not see and contain things like a database, some complex logic which can't be defined on the front end, and much more under the hood stuff. There are 3 main types of web developers. We have front-end web developers, back-end, and full-stack web developers, which entails both front-end and back-end. Here is a quick roadmap for a front-end developer. For the sake of this course, we will only focus on this type of developer. A front-end developer should start by learning HTML and CSS, which this course teaches. It can take about a month and a half. Then you should go to JavaScript, which can take another month and a half to attain a reasonable understanding and level. Then finally, get started using the JavaScript framework or library like React.js, Angular, or Vue.js. I recommend going with React.js first since it is the most popular right now. I have a course available for React.js for you. Depending on which company hires you or what you want to accomplish later, you can always learn the other frameworks anytime. I'm ATO Bradley, and let's get started. First things first, we will install the necessary tools that we're going to need. The code editor we will be using today is VS Code. Feel free to use any code editor, but I recommend you use VS Code to follow along with this course. To install VS Code, go ahead and do a quick Google search and click on the first link that shows up. Then you click on the download button. Depending on your operating system, it's going to download the right version for you. We then need to click on our downloaded file and install it to any disk of our choice. I'm just going to maintain the default location. Click on Next, and since I already had VS Code installed, I'll click on Yes, then wait for it to finish installing and click on Finish. After you've installed VS Code, we will install some helpful extensions. So go ahead and click on this icon on the left and search the extension Prettier. It helps formatting our code and make everything look neat. The next extension we'll install is called Open Live Server. So go ahead and install it. Now we must create our folder where we will store our files. So head over to the desktop and create your folder. Let's name it HTML. Now we will head over to VS Code and open the folder. Then inside the folder, we will create a file and name it index.html. This often represents the home page of websites. To start writing our first HTML code, we need to write doctype HTML. This must be written in every HTML document as it tells the browser about what version of HTML the page is written and ensures that the web page is parsed the same way by different web browsers. So it basically tells the browser what kind of document to expect. And in this case, it's an HTML document. Every part of an HTML file has what is called HTML element. An HTML element is defined by a start tag, some content, and an end tag. We can now populate our HTML file with elements. We will start with the HTML tag. This is the root element of an HTML document. All other elements will be put inside it. Then we will have the head tags. This is where the meta information about the web page will be inserted, such as the title, the description, and much more. We will see more of what can be inserted into the head tags in the following lessons. Now let's go ahead and add a title. So if we save the file and open it in Chrome, we will see that we have added a title to our web page. Next important thing that goes in the head tags is the website's metadata. The metadata is generally used by search engines to serve information like the title and the website description to users. Let's add some metadata to our web page. The charset attribute specifies the character encoding for the HTML document. We are not going to get into the details of it. The meta information that is important for us right now is the description. So let's go ahead and add a description. If we go to Google and search a website, we will observe the use of the meta information here. Here we can see the title of the website, and just below the title, we can see the description. It's always important to add a description so that users can have an idea of what your website is about. We will then define the body. This is where the actual visible content of the web page lies. Now let's add a heading and a paragraph. H1 in HTML is a heading. You can have several types of heading, with H1 being the largest, and the smaller the number after the H, the smaller the heading size. Now let's add the paragraph. Let's head over to Google and search for lorem ipsum. We copy it and add it to our paragraph. We're just doing so that we can have enough text inside our paragraph. After this, we'll save our file and open in the web browser. We refresh the page and here we can see we have added a heading and a paragraph to our web page. Add 3 different headings of different sizes and try changing the title of your web page and modifying the paragraph. This is just for you to get used to the elements we just covered. Do this before moving over to the next lesson. In this lesson, we will talk about HTML attributes. Every HTML element can have one or more attributes. Attributes have additional information about elements and are always specified in the start tag. We will see an example using the p tag for the paragraph we created in the previous lesson. We will start by adding a style. Style here is an attribute. The style attribute is used to specify some inline CSS properties in the tag. We will look at it more detailedly in another lesson. But for now, let's just focus on some essential styling. Let's save our file and open in the browser. We will see that we have changed the color of our text. To see more about attribute, let's use more HTML tags. Let's add an image. To add an image, we will use the img tag. But before we add the image, we need to actually get the image file. So we'll just make a quick Google search and search for nature images and download any image of your choice. After downloading the image, just add it over to your HTML folder. We are going to add this image to our web page. But first, let's rename our file. We'll just keep it simple and give it the name image. Next, we specify the source attribute, which will be the path to our image. Since the image is in the same directory as our HTML file, we are just going to write the name of the image and its extension. Another attribute we need to specify here is the alt attribute. This attribute specifies an alternate text for an image if the image cannot be displayed. That is, if the user's internet connection is slow or the image cannot be loaded, it's going to display the alt text. We save our file now and open in the browser to see the changes we have made. As we can observe, the image is too large. So let's add a width and a height attribute to reduce the size of our image. We'll set the width to 100 pixels and the height to 100 pixels. Let's save this and open it in the browser. Refresh the page and we can see that in this lesson we'll look at hyperlinks. Before you move to the next lesson, a website typically has one or more links to other websites or other web pages. To add a link,
modify the
we will use
of
the
anchor
anchor element
which
we will write
blue and green
using the A tags.
Also make the image
href
to be slightly
attribute,
larger,
which will specify the URL or path to another page. Let's do a quick example here and add a link.
You save it and observe the changes in your browser.
In this lesson, we will look at hyperlinks. A website typically has one or more links to other websites or other web pages. To add a link, we will use the anchor element, which we will write using the A tag. Let's first add the boilerplate code for our HTML file. To do this, just go ahead and type HTML and select HTML5. Visual Studio Code will automatically generate the code for you. We will start by adding the anchor tags. Then we will add the href attribute, which will specify the URL or path to another page. Let's do a quick example here and add a link. Inside the A tag, we have to write some text. We save it and open it in the browser. We have just added a link in our page. This is supposed to link us to another website, but if we click on it, it's going to show an error message. This is just because we have not added the HTTPS in front of the URL. So we're just going to add the HTTPS, then try it out again. Now it's working. It takes us to another website. We will see other types of href links we can add, like a link to another page within the site. To do this, we'll create another file. We will name it more.html. This more page will just contain a heading. We'll just give it a random name so it shouldn't be empty. Then in our index.html file, we'll add another anchor element and link it to the more page. In the href attribute, instead of adding a URL, we will instead specify the path to the other file. We'll save our file and open in the browser. If we click on the second link we just added, we will see that it takes us to the second page we created. Now let's create a new folder and we're going to add our more.html file in this folder. Doing this, we will see how we are going to change the path to the file in our href attribute. If we save the file and open in the browser, we see that it doesn't open the page anymore. This is just because we have changed the location of our more.html file. We are doing this because typically when you're building a bigger website, you'll have several web pages and you have to separate them in several folders. So it's very important to know how to specify paths to different files contained in different folders. To specify the path to our file, we will insert two dots followed by a backslash. Visual Studio Code automatically suggests the folder in which the file is contained. So this is a very helpful feature. We'll just go ahead and select the page and save the file and open it in our browser. We refresh the page and we see that the link still brings us to our more page. When we click on the link, we may want to automatically open it on a new tab.
So we are going to add the target attribute and specify it to blank. This is going to open our link in a new tab. So let's do this, save it and open it in the browser. We see that when we click on the link right now, it brings us to a new tab and the other tab still remains open. Before you move to the next lesson, download the exercises files of this lesson and complete the exercises inside.
In this lesson, we will look at styling in HTML. The style attribute in HTML is used to add styles to an element such as color, font, padding, margin, and much more. In our index.html file, we will add some styles to the elements we created. Let's start by enclosing the content of our site in a div tag. A div tag defines a section in an HTML document. Then we'll add a heading. Then after the heading, we're just going to add a paragraph. Remember the lorem ipsum text we got from the first lesson? Just go ahead and copy the same text and paste it in the paragraph. If we open what we just did in the browser, we see that we have just added a heading and a paragraph. Now we are going to add some styles to the tag we just added. To add styles, we are going to use the style attribute. We will start by styling our div.
We will give it a padding of 20 pixels. Then we'll add a background color. Let's just select any color from the suggestions. We will select blue. Then we are going to center our content. Next thing we'll do is to style our heading. We are going to change the color of the text to red. We'll just use the color property. Then we'll change the font size to 20 pixels. We'll also add a style to our paragraph. We'll add a color of blue. Then the font size, we set the font size to 15 pixels. Let's save this and open it in our browser. If we refresh the page, we see that we have successfully added styling to our HTML document. We can also modify the width of our paragraph for it to take up less space of the screen. Let us go ahead and add a width property and we'll give it a size of 500 pixels. We refresh the page and observe the changes. There are several different CSS properties that can help you style your web page in several different ways. A very great resource to find these CSS properties is w3schools/CSS. There are several different properties listed on this site, and you can always come back to it if you forget any property, as the important thing is not to actually retain all of these properties, but to actually know how they work. We just saw how we can add inline styles to HTML elements. Now, the other type of style we'll see is internal styling. This will be done directly in our HTML file. Internal styles help us write more general styling which we can apply to several elements all at once. To do this, we are going to use the style tag. This is going to be placed in the head tag. We start with the div tag. We are just going to rewrite the styles we wrote inside our inline styles. Then we're going to move to the heading. See how to style particular elements, all we need to do is just to write their tags. We open brackets and insert the styles inside, and it's going to be applied to every other element with the same tag in our file. So if there were more than one divs or more than one paragraph tags, this tag is going to be applied to all of them in the HTML document. So now we'll just get rid of the inline styles we previously added. We save our files and open in the browser. Since we just copied the styles we added in the inline style, nothing has changed on our web page. Let's just change the color of our paragraph text to confirm that the styles we added are actually working. We save our file and open it. We see that the color has actually changed. Take note that inline styles have a higher priority than internal styles. This means that if we add an inline property and an internal property to the same element, the inline property will be applied before the internal property. Let's see an example here by adding a background color inline to our div tag and an internal color to the same div tag. In our internal style, we'll give our div a background color of red. And now let's go to the div tag and specify a background color of green. When we view it in our browser, we see that the green background is rendered and the red one is left out. If we delete the style attribute in the div tag, we see that it renders the red background color. After every lesson, I always recommend practicing what we cover in this lesson a little bit. To help you practice, I've provided some exercise files for you. Go ahead and download the exercise file and make sure you complete the exercises before you move over to the next lesson. In this lesson, we are going to cover the types of lists in HTML. We'll talk about unordered lists, ordered lists, and description lists. Unordered lists are specified by the UL tag, ordered lists are specified by the OL tags, and the actual items in the list are specified by the LI tags. We will start by looking at examples. Let's go ahead and create an unordered list. Firstly, we've just added a heading which is going to announce what we're going to have in our list. This list is not an official list, so you can add any languages you like. These are just my best languages. So let's add JavaScript, Python, and Java. We save it and open in the browser. We can see our unordered list here, and the items are jotted in point form. For the ordered list, we'll just copy everything we did for the unordered list and replace the UL to OL. Then we add an HR tag and a BR tag. The HR tag is used to add a horizontal line, and the BR tag is a break. This is used to go to a new line. We can see the difference between an unordered list and an ordered list here. In ordered list, we have the elements ordered and numbered incrementally, while the unordered list has dots to indicate the new list items. We can also have nested list items, which we can use to display sub-items in our list. Let's add a sub-item in our unordered list. To do this, we'll just go to a list item, and before the closing tag, we add another unordered list. Then we just go ahead and add the list items. We add React.js, Angular, and Vue.js here. We save our document, we open in the browser and refresh the page. As we see here, the sub-items here are nested inside the list item, which is JavaScript. We can do the same for the ordered list. Again, we will copy our unordered list and just paste inside the ordered list. We just nested an ordered list, and we can do the same for an unordered list inside an ordered list. So we'll just change the OL by the UL, save it and open in our browser. We see that we have similar results with the unordered list. The only difference is that the unordered list items are dotted. The final list type we will see here is the description list. Let's first add a horizontal line, then we add a break using the BR tag. Let's just add a heading, we'll call it description list. Then we populate our list with its items. We'll add a DL tag for the description list. Then the top item is denoted using the DT tag. We'll name it front-end languages. Then the list items will add HTML and CSS. Then we'll add JavaScript. Then we'll just add another upper item and call it backend languages. Still, for the list items here, we'll just add Java and Python. Let's save it and open it in our browser. We refresh the page and we see that we have a description list here. Lists have several different use cases. We can create a lot of things with lists. I mostly use lists to create things like footers and navigation menus. In another lesson, we'll see how we can use the list to create a navbar and a footer. An exercise file is provided at the end of this lesson for you to practice more with lists. In the exercise file, you'll be required to add some styling to the list we made. So make sure to go through the exercise file before moving to the next lesson. In this lesson, we are going to see how you can add a table to your web page. To add a table, you need to specify the table tags. We will create a table and I will explain each tag as we go. Tables are made up of rows and columns. So we will start by adding a row. We will do this using the tr tag. Then inside the row, we are going to add headings. This is done using the th tag. We are going to create a table of students, which is going to contain their names, their classes, and their numbers. So go ahead and populate our header with the name, class, and number. After, we create another table row. Inside the table row, we are going to have the table cells. The table cells are denoted using the tz tag. Within the first tag, we will have the name. Then in the second tag, we will have the class, and the last one, we have the number. We'll create a second table row and add another student inside. So we just copy the first table row and paste it below the ending tag. Then we'll modify the name in order to change the student. We'll save it and look at the table we created in the browser. As you can see, we have just created a table and populated it with some information. But the table doesn't look so good because it doesn't have any borders around it. So we'll go ahead and add a border. So we'll go ahead and add borders around the content. To do this, we'll add the border attribute in the table tag and set it equals to 1. Let's save it and open in the browser and see the changes. As we can see, our table looks so much better with the borders. We can make it look even better by adding some styling to it. So now we are going to see how we will use the extension we first installed in the first lesson. So go ahead and right click on your file, on your index.html file, and select Open Live Server. This is going to help us see the changes to our web page directly as we are typing. So we are just going to minimize our code editor and put it side by side like this with our browser. So we can see the changes we make appear immediately as we do them. To add style, we are going to use internal styling. So go ahead and add the style tag in our head element. We will start by targeting the table. In the table, we will add a width of 100% so our table can take off the whole screen. The next property we are going to add is a border collapse. This is going to reduce the width of our border and set it to a lighter and a single width. The next thing we are going to style is our table row. We will give it a background color of gray. Then we are going to style our table header. In order to style any element in the table, we first of all target the table before targeting the element. So in our table header, we'll give it a padding top of 12 pixels and a padding bottom of 12 pixels. This is in order to increase the space around the text. Then we're going to align our item to the left and give it a background color of violet. Our table already looks so much better. Now we are going to give our text a white color. The next thing we are going to style is our table cells. We'll give it a border of 1 pixel, set it to solid, and give it a border color of gray. Then we are going to add a padding of 8 pixels. As we can see, adding just a little bit of style makes our table look so much better. You can play around more with the styling to practice more. And as always, there is an exercise file that has been included in this lesson, which is going to help you practice more with tables and styling. Make sure to complete the exercise before you move to the next lesson. If you've ever filled out any sign-in or sign-up page on a website, then you have surely filled at least one HTML form. Most websites contain at least a form in order to collect user information, for access granting purposes, or for mailing lists, and even more. So forms are very important, and we are going to look at it in this lesson. A form in HTML is used to collect user input. The user input is more often sent to a server for processing. To create an HTML form, we will use the form element for the user input. This is denoted using the form tags. Now between these form tags, we can specify the different inputs and a button for submission. Let's get started with some inputs. To add an input in our web page, we will use the input element. The input element, unlike other elements, doesn't have a second closing tag. Just like the image tag, the starting tag closes itself. We will create a form which will allow the user to enter his first and his last name. To do that, we'll first have to create a label. The label will have the first name. After the label, we'll create an input and we'll give it an ID first name. Then we'll give it the name attribute and call it first name too. Then we'll specify the type. The type is going to be text. For the last name, we create another label last name. Then similar to the first name, we create an input with the ID last name, the name equals to last name too, and the type equals to text. Then in the label, we are going to add the for attribute. Take note that the name in the for attribute in the label should be the same as the ID in the input. Let's save our file now and open in the browser. To make everything clean and put everything in the new line, we use the BR tag, which is used as a break to put everything into a new line. We'll add a break after the first name, and we'll add another break after the last name. Let's save this and open in our browser. So we have created a form which allows the user to enter his first and his last name. The next type of input we are going to look at right now is the radio button. Let's go ahead and erase what we have done right now. We start by adding a heading. We'll insert it out of the form. The heading will just say select your gender. We are going to have a simple input which is going to allow the user to select his gender, either male or female. We'll start with the input tag. We'll give it a type of radio, ID of male, and the name equal to gender. For the value, we'll just give it the value of male. After that, we have to give it a label and we'll call it male. This is going to allow the user to select the option male. And as previously stated, in the label, the for attribute should be the same as the ID attribute in the input. So we are going to call it male too. Then for the female option, we'll just add another input, give it a type radio, ID female, name gender, and the value female. Then similar to what we did for the male option, we'll add a label, and in the for attribute, we'll call it female. We save all of this and open in our browser to observe the changes. We see that we have created two options. We can select either male or female, but not both. That's the actual use of a radio button. And thanks to the label and the for attribute we just specified, instead of selecting the circle directly, we can just click on the name and it's going to select the option that we want. In the next lesson, we are going to look at checkboxes and buttons. In this lesson, we are going to see how we can add checkboxes to our forms. Let's start by deleting what we did in the previous lesson. We will change the title from select gender to select your favorite cars. This is because with checkboxes, you can have one or more options, whereas with radio button, you can only select one option. We will start by adding an input. We'll give it a type of checkbox, an ID of car 1, and a value of 4. Then similar to what we do with the radio button, we'll give it a label. And in the for attribute, the for attribute will be equal to the ID in the input. So we'll give it car 1. Just go ahead and copy this and paste it 4 times to give it 4 options. We will modify the value for the other 3 options, the ID and the for attribute. So we can have 3 options in our checkbox. To follow along, just modify your attributes as I am modifying mine. When we're done, we save this, we open in the browser and test it out. We see that we have our checkboxes here. And as we can see, we can select either one checkbox or we can select all the checkboxes at the same time. And thanks to our label, we are not obliged to select the checkbox directly. We can just click on the label directly and it selects the checkbox. That is why your for attribute should always be equal to your ID attribute. The next type of input we are going to look at right now is the button. When you fill out any form on a web page, you should be able to submit it. This is usually done thanks to a submit button. So right now we are going to add a form which will allow the user to enter his first and his last name, and we add the button at the end. So let's add a label with first name. In the for attribute, we'll give it first name. Then we add an input and give it a type text. Then we give it an ID of first name and a value of first name. We'll do the same thing for the last name. For consistency and to make everything clean, we'll just add the BR tag after the first name and the BR tag after the last name. We save it and open in a browser to see what we got. Now to add our submit button, we'll add another input and give it a type submit. Then we'll give it the value submit. This is going to be the name of the button. We'll modify the value in our first name and our last name input. We're just going to give it the values ATO and Bradley. This is so that the initial value inside the text input should be actual names. Let's save it. We'll open in the browser. And we see we have a form that we can submit. Observe here that when we submit the form, the values entered inside the input are copied inside the URL. But we don't want this to happen. We want that when we submit the values, it should maintain the current URL and submit the form to our servers. So what we're going to do is that we'll add an attribute called methods to our form, and we are going to give this attribute the value of post. Then we'll save our file back and test in a browser. We see now that when we hit on the submit button, it doesn't copy the value into the URL, but it has already submitted the form. We check this by refreshing the browser and we are prompted with a message to confirm the form submission. This means that the form has already been submitted, but now it doesn't copy our values directly to the URL. This is indeed the desired reaction we want. You see how easy it is to add a form to your website. The next thing you should do is to style your form to make it beautiful. In the next lesson, we are going to create a simple contact form and style it. An exercise file has been provided at the end of this lesson for you to practice styling your form before moving to the next lesson. Make sure to complete the exercise before you move over to the next lesson.